the smell hit first. Wet cardboard, diesel exhaust, and the mineral cold of a Leadville morning in April, frost still clinging to the gutters past 9 o'clock. Wade Mercer was 36 years old, standing on the curb of a rental house that no longer belonged to him. The wind off the mosquito range found his jacket before anything else did, and he felt the cold in his teeth before he heard the bang of dresser drawers set down too hard inside, before he saw the boxes stacked crooked across the dead grass. His whole life sorted into what fit in a truck bed and what didn't. By the end of that week, one Mercer would be worth more than the rest of the family combined. Nobody, least of all, Wade, would have guessed it would be him. That was the number in his checking account. 40 short of what the locksmith by the door was about to charge the landlord to change the locks for good. 3 weeks earlier, his business partner, Dale Pruitt, had walked out of Mercer Fabrication with the payroll account and a half-finished excuse, and the shop had closed before the next round of client checks ever cleared. Wade didn't say Dale's name out loud anymore. He just felt it, the way a person feels a bruise they keep forgetting is there until they lean on it. His daughter, Scout, 8 years old, sat on the porch step holding the one thing the deputies had let her carry herself, a brass lighter, dull and dented, engraved HM, that had belonged to her great-grandfather, Hollis Mercer, who died 9 days earlier and left behind nothing anyone in the family had considered worth fighting over. Apparently, somebody had decided to fight over it anyway. Wade had learned a long time ago that asking for help cost more than people made it look. So, he picked up the last box, told Scout to grab her backpack, and didn't look back at the house, 41 miles north, in a glass-fronted dealership in Buena Vista. His cousin Garrett Harlan was signing for a brand new truck. Paid in full, while a salesman refilled his coffee. Wade signed nothing that morning, that particular put his name on in. His phone rang as he pulled onto the highway, a law office in town, something about Hollis Mercer's estate, a reading scheduled for Thursday. What could a man who died owning nothing but a busted trailer and a worthless half-share in a played-out claim possibly have left behind that anyone would bother showing up to fight over? The law office smelled of leather polish and burnt coffee, the kind of smell that told you the carpet cost more than your truck. Wade sat in a chair too stiff to lean back in. Scout was with a sitter for the hour and watched Garrett Harlan check his Rolex twice before the attorney even opened the folder. Garrett wore a cashmere half-zip the color of wet slate and the calm of a man who already knew what was coming. He should have. Hollis had spent his last 6 years letting Garrett manage the family interests, the mineral rights, the storage units, and the $418,000, now sitting in a trust the attorney read aloud without ceremony. Garrett had always measured a person's worth by what they wore into a room, not by what they carried out of it. To Garrett Harlan, the mineral rights to the Mercer claim, the storage facility on Route 24, and $418,000 to Wade Mercer, a single-wide camper trailer, registered 1936, currently sitting on a half-acre lot outside town, and one key, that was all. Garrett didn't laugh, which was almost worse than if he had. He just looked at Wade with something close to pity and said, quiet enough that only Wade and the attorney could hear it, "Guess, Hollis wanted you to have something to remember him by, even if it's worthless." Wade said nothing. He'd had 36 years of practice not giving people the reaction they were fishing for, while across the table its pity sat on him as comfortably as the cashmere. The attorney slid a small manila envelope across the table. Inside, a single brass key heavier than it looked, the metal gone dark with age, stamped along its shaft with 3 faint letters Wade had to tilt toward the window to read. CMC. Garrett signed his paperwork in under 4 minutes and left to make a lunch reservation. Wade sat in the parking lot afterward with the envelope in his lap, slowly warming against his palm. The cold brass slowly warming against his palm. A camper trailer. The same one, maybe, that Hollis used to mention on the porch some summers. Half a story, never the whole thing, about a winter so bad the bank had closed its doors and never opened them again. And how his own father had kept the family whole some other way nobody ever explained. Wade had always assumed that was just an old man rambling. He started the truck. It was time to go find out. The drive took 53 minutes northwest out of town, gravel switchbacks giving way to a half-mile dirt spur that hadn't seen a grader in years, climbing toward a flat at 9,400 feet, where the trees thinned and the wind never really stopped. Wade had sold his last cordless impact driver at a pawn shop for $60 just to cover gas, in case the spur ate his truck's undercarriage the way it looked like it might. It nearly did. The trailer sat exactly where the title said it would, half swallowed by waist-high grass. One axle sunk into the dirt at an angle that made the whole thing list sideways like a ship taking on water. Before Wade saw any of it, he smelled it: mildew, rust, and the dry pine sharpness of a forest that had spent decades quietly reclaiming the lot. The cold hit next, sharper at altitude, biting through his jacket the moment he stepped out of the truck. The aluminum skin under his palm was freezing and pitted, scaled with rust along every seam. Somewhere downhill, a couldn't see ran loud with spring melt. Only then did he really look at it. A 1936 homemade camp trailer, 18 feet of riveted aluminum and rotted wood trim, windows boarded, door hanging on one hinge. Once this had been a paymaster's portable office, sturdy enough to survive being towed up a mountain switchback every season for years. Now it could barely survive standing still. For a second, he almost got back in the truck. It was a wreck, the kind of inheritance Garrett would tell a story about at a dinner party. But Scout needed somewhere to sleep that wasn't a motel, and Wade had $211 and nowhere left to be proud. He pried the door open with a tire iron instead. Inside, the trailer told two stories. Most of the paneling was original, old-growth fir, blind riveted the way a tradesman would have done it in 1936, the same rivets running floor to ceiling on every wall but one. The north wall used different fasteners, hex head sheet metal screws, decades newer, sunk in a tight, deliberate grid that matched nothing else in the trailer. Somebody had opened that wall once already, and somebody had gone to real trouble sealing it back up. He started with the screws nearest the floor, working a cordless driver he'd only kept because the pawn shop didn't want it, backing out screw aft on the worst ones. The driver 4 by hand, knuckles split. He finished 4 by hand, knuckles split. Before the panel gave even slightly, Stays 1 confirmed. Something about this wall was different, and it had been made different on purpose. The panel didn't simply lift away. It had been shimmed at the bottom edge, wedged against a hidden ledger strip Wade could feel but not see, as if the wall had been built around whatever it hid rather than over it. He worked a flat bar into the seam and leaned his full weight against it. Wood groaned. A seam of dust sifted down, pale and dry, undisturbed since whenever the panel had last moved. It came loose all at once, nearly taking him down with it. Behind the fir paneling sat a second wall. Thin galvanized tin, painted flat black, fitted into the framing like it had been built specifically to be forgotten. No hinge, no handle, just 4 smaller, older screws rusted nearly solid into the metal. These didn't back out. Wade worked them for 11 minutes with a pair of pliers. And clean off, and the panel swung free on its own weight. The smell came first. Old canvas, machine oil, and underneath it something colder and more mineral, like the inside of a vault that had never once been aired out. The cold followed, a pocket of trapped mountain air that hadn't moved since before Wade's father was born. Then his fingers found the edge of a bundle wrapped in oilcloth, stiff with age, heavier than anything that size should be. Only then did his eyes adjust enough in the dim light to confirm what his hands had already understood. Coins, 587 wrapped, rolls gone soft and split, gold double eagles dated through the 1920s, dulled by 8 decades of darkness but unmistakably, impossibly real. Wade didn't shout. He barely moved. He knelt on the floor of a trailer he'd been handed as a joke, holding more wealth in 2 hands than he'd held in his entire life, completely still. Stillness of a man right before he lets himself believe something. Folded beneath the last roll of coins was a letter, the paper gone brittle and brown, dated April the 11th, 1933, 4 days after the president had ordered every citizen in the country to turn in their gold coin for paper currency, and 6 weeks after the Bank of Stray Horse had locked its doors for good. Silas Mercer, paymaster's clerk and Wade's great-grandfather, had written it the night he finished sealing the wall. He'd pulled the family's savings out in gold the morning. The bank rumors started. He wrote, and he wasn't handing it to a government that had let the bank fail, and then wanted the gold besides. He wasn't prouder of feeding his family. The letter named the bank, named the date, and named one more thing. A withdrawal slip folded separate bearing his personal account number, proof if it was ever needed, that the gold had been his own, earned and saved. Never company money, never anyone's to claim but his blood's. The last line was for whoever found it. He hoped it would be someone who needed it as badly as he once had, and that they'd remember him kindly for keeping it safe so long. Compared to $418,000 in a trust and a stack of mineral rights, a busted trailer had just become the only inheritance in the Mercer family, actually worth fighting for. Outside, gravel popped under tires that weren't his. The car that pulled up wasn't Garrett's truck. It was a Navy sedan with a Buena Vista law firm's decal on the door, and the man who climbed out introduced himself as Garrett's attorney before. Wade had even gotten the tin panel back over the hole in the wall. Someone had been watching the county recorder's office. The attorney admitted as much, almost cheerfully, when Wade asked how they'd known to come the same afternoon. The title transfer on the trailer had tripped a flag on an old corporate filing nobody had touched in decades. Mahala Mining and Milling Company, dissolved in name only, its remaining claims and associated assets folded years ago into a holding company Garrett now controlled. The attorney used that phrase twice. Standing 8 feet from a hole in the wall he didn't yet know existed, his car's law firm decal gleaming against a man whose only filing cabinet that week was a truck toolbox, the claim itself was almost reasonable, which was the worst part. Silas Mercer had been the mining company's paymaster's clerk in 1933. Anything tied to his employment, payroll, company funds, company property, belonged on paper to whoever now held the dissolved company's assets. If the gold had come from payroll, it was Garrett's. A county judge had already granted a temporary hold pending review. 11 days, no movement of any estate-adjacent property from the trailer or its premises. Wade didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice, didn't ask the attorney to leave. He nodded once, said he understood, and watched the sedan pull back down the dirt spur the way it had come. He had 11 days. He had a letter naming a personal bank account, not a payroll ledger. He had a withdrawal slip he hadn't even unfolded yet, still tucked in the oilcloth where Silas had left it, dated 3 days before the bank closed for good. 3 days before any company payroll would have even been due. Garrett's claim assumed the gold had come from the company. Garrett's claim was about to run into a piece of paper that proved it hadn't. Wade didn't say any of that out loud. He drove back into town with the coins locked in his truck's toolbox and made one phone call, not to a lawyer yet, but to the Leadville Heritage Museum, where a woman named Odette Calloway had spent 30 years cataloging exactly the kind of paperwork a failed bank leaves behind. The hearing took place 8 days later in a county courtroom that still smelled like the new carpet glue from a renovation 2 years back. Garrett arrived in a charcoal suit with his attorney a half step behind him, the same unbothered calm on his face he'd worn at the will reading, a man who'd never once needed to prepare for a fight because nobody had ever made him lose one. Wade brought a folder. Inside it, the unfolded withdrawal slip, the letter, and a notarized statement from Odette Calloway at the Heritage Museum, confirming that the Bank of Stray Horses surviving ledger fragments, donated to the museum's archive 11 years earlier by the bank's living teller's estate, recorded a personal withdrawal under account number 4000 in 71 on April the 8th, 1933, in the name of Silas Mercer. Not a company account. A personal one closed out 3 days before the bank's doors shut for good, and 4 days before he sealed it into a trailer wall. Garrett's attorney argued the corporate claim anyway, the associated assets, employment-derived property. The judge let him finish. Payroll-adjacent funds. Then she asked to see the ledger number again. Wade watched it land on Garrett's face in real time. Not all at once. First confusion, then a kind of recalculation, the look he probably gave a contractor who'd quoted him wrong, and only then. Finally, something closer to the truth. The company had never owned this, had never owned any version of this, and there was nothing left in the filing to argue with. The judge dissolved the temporary hold, on the spot. Personal property, lawfully inherited, she said. reading the title transfer date into the record. He just looked at Wade the way he had in the law office 9 days earlier. Except now the pity had nowhere left to land. "Guess you got lucky," he said, low, like he believed it. Wade closed his folder. "You said I'd never amount to anything but a trailer, Garrett. Turns out the trailer amounted to $1,137,606. I'll let you do the math on what that makes you." He didn't wait for a response. He picked up Scout's drawing of the trailer, taped inside his folder since that morning, and walked out of the courtroom into a hallway, lit gold by the afternoon sun coming through the windows. The same colors, more or less plus lost as multos watts per bean 2 blocks away, waiting on a federal appraisal. The accounting wasn't finished. Garrett's holding company still had paperwork to untangle, and the coins still needed a proper sale. But for the first time in longer than Wade could remember, none of that felt like it belonged to anyone else to decide. The coins sold at a Denver numismatic auction 11 weeks later for $1,219,310. Collector premiums on St. Gordon's double eagles running well above simple melt value. Especially the dozen graded uncirculated, untouched, since the day Silas Mercer wrapped them in oilcloth and sealed them away. Garrett's holding company was audited within the year, the dissolved mining filing finally drawing the kind of scrutiny it had avoided for decades. Dassey, by never being looked at closely, he kept the mineral rights. He lost the family's good opinion of him, which, in a town the size of turned out to cost more. Wade used the money to open Mercer & Daughter Fabrication on Harrison Avenue, a small metal shop with exactly one employee and a sign scout, helped letter herself badly, on purpose, because she said it should look like a kid made it. He kept the brass key from the manila envelope on a hook above the register next to the lighter engraved HM, and told customers the story when they asked, which they always did. He didn't keep the trailer. He gave it to the Heritage Museum, where Odette Calloway built a small, permanent display around it. The original riveted fur wall on one side, the tin panel propped open on the other. Silas Mercer's letter framed under glass in the middle. On the morning the shop opened, Wade stood in the doorway with Scout beside him, the smell of fresh-cut steel and brewing coffee, replacing diesel and wet cardboard. The cold mountain air this time just air, nothing he needed to brace against. A man can be handed nothing and still be the only one in the family who walks away with everything that matters. Hollis Mercer had known that. He just needed somebody patient enough to go looking. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe for more hidden fortune and inheritance stories. Thanks for watching.